Hello, welcome to the Pursuit of Excellence with me, Anthony Beirudi. Need your help real quick. If you like the videos, hit the thumbs up button right below, and please subscribe to get access to our latest interviews. Hit the subscribe button right there. Also, we'd love to hear from you about our interviews. In the comment section, tell us who you want us to interview or what you thought about the whole thing. Without further ado, enjoy the interview. We're very excited today to be joined by Jake Mouritzen, head coach and athletic director at GW Graham. Thank you very much for joining us, Coach.
Hey, no problem. Super excited to talk basketball and just talk about all the good times that were happening prior to our little pandemic here.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it's great to have you. So let's go back to where'd you grow up and how'd you get started with sports?
Sure, yeah. When I was 4, we moved out from Ontario. I was born in Guelph, Ontario. My dad got a job out here. And so we moved out and bought this tiny little house actually in Yarrow, which is in between Chilliwack and Abbotsford. And started playing every sport I could when I was 4 or 5 years old. Like lots of great athletes, I had super supportive parents. And so we didn't have a lot of money, but I never missed an opportunity. So growing up, I played everything. Whatever the season was, I played. In the old days, that's how it worked. And everything from hockey to basketball to baseball, track and field. And then kind of just kept going that. I started coaching really young. I remember coaching a junior girls volleyball team when I was in grade 9 and really enjoyed the coaching aspect. And then in high school, my 2 main sports were basketball and soccer, but soccer, I was definitely a little bit ahead of the game. And so when I ended up going to UVic, that's where I actually played my university sport was in soccer. And got super lucky and got to play with Bruce Wilson. We call him Chief. Everyone calls him Chief. Bruce was the captain of our only World Cup team in 1986 and definitely got to learn what elite sport was like being there and what it meant to win and lose, but more importantly, what it meant to train hard and be a part of a family. So a lot of the coaching philosophies that I took into my career, I learned from Chief, and some of them were hard lessons, but he was a big mentor for me growing up through that university period, and that's kind of where it started.
Well, let's talk about that real quick. When you say hard lessons, what do you mean?
It's anyone that has gone from the high school to the university level knows it's obviously a big jump. And I remember the first season I played, worked hard to get on the team. We played UBC opening night under the lights at UVic. If you're a soccer player, UVic's the best school in the country to go to because they don't have football. So we've got this huge stadium and it's just for soccer. So opening night, playing UBC, obviously a rival, and we're up 1-0, about 3 minutes left in the game. I get put in. I played up front in the striker position, got put through on a breakaway, and I missed the net, hit the post. Goalie grabbed the ball, kicked it 60 yards. UBC got the ball, scored, and the game was over, and we tied 1-1. Oh. I was like, oh, that was rough. We went into the locker room after that game, and Chief taught me what it meant to finish games. It was my first real understanding of, wow, we're doing this, and this is his job. And from that point on, I remember being so motivated to work hard every day and get better. That's where I get my 1% better every day. I preach that at Graham. But the idea that I'd made a mistake, needed to learn from the mistake, but that we were playing at an elite level. And it was so much fun. But throughout those years, lots of lessons on the pitch, lessons off. But it's definitely when I started my own career, the goal was to take as many of those lessons at that level and start to instill them at the high school level. So I still do that today.
So what'd you go to school with? What did you graduate with?
So I went to UVic and I graduated with a 5-year education degree with a major in PE and history. UVic's one of the only schools that has that 5-year education phys ed degree. So it was awesome because I was learning to coach and be in the gym right from year 2 all the way through. So we were doing education and coaching and training all the way through. I was getting NCCP stuff. UVic's just a great school for that. So I graduated with that degree. And then I was never coming back to Chilliwack because that's where I grew up. And I got a phone call one day saying, hey, do you want to come work in Chilliwack for a little bit? I was in Australia at the time. I was like, yeah, I guess so. So I came back, and I've been there ever since. But I taught for 2 years, and then I went right back and did my master's in administrative leadership and education. And again, at that point, I thought, hey, maybe I'm going to go into admin. But really, the stuff I learned there was, again, just solid leadership skills for what I do today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we need more people taking athletic director seriously. So it's a positive thing for the community for sure. So you do your master's. Do you decide to stay full time in Chilliwack right off the top? Like, was that what happened there? You just got a job, and that was it?
Well, back then we only had the 2 high schools, Chilliwack and Sardis, and I kind of started taking temporary contracts at Sardis year after year, and I was actually at Sardis for 6 full years on temporary contracts. And then the ministry announced they were going to open a new high school. Excuse me. At that point, I was still thinking admin, and I had actually interviewed in the Langley School District for a vice principalship. As I was coming out of that meeting, Diego Testa, who was our first principal at Graham, phoned me and said, hey, and I had interviewed there for a few positions. He asked if I wanted to come and be the department head for PE. And I said, well, I will, but I also want to be the athletic director. And at that time, GW Graham was designated to be a fine arts school. And I said, if you're going to hire me, we're obviously going to have a focus in athletics. And, excuse me. And, oh, I got frog in my throat. And from there, I took that job. And so I was lucky enough to take on that job when GW Graham was a hole in the ground still. So probably one of my best experiences in life was getting to take all the vision that I had for what a great program would be and build it from the very beginning, including the color of the bleachers. So I kind of got to design the whole thing and then just started to build. And I always tell the story. In 2006, we opened as a grade 7 to 10 school, and then we added 11s, and then we added 12s 2 years later. But in that first year, we offered soccer and field hockey and basketball, cross country, track and field. We didn't win one game in any sport all year.
Really?
Yeah. And so, and my original plan was, if we're going to become great, we need to look great. So we had the best uniforms in the province, but we didn't get a lot of wins. But you know what? I kept recruiting great coaches, and I still do that today. Every time I meet someone, whether they're a new TOC or someone in the community, ask them if they're interested in coaching or being a part of it. And our philosophy at Graham is the more great people you have on the bench, the better. And I just started collecting more and more great people, and everything started to snowball and in all our sports. And obviously basketball became my passion. And I was lucky enough to do it with my wife on the other side. A few years in, she came and started coaching the girls' side. And then I was just collecting great people, and then each year trying to offer new elite opportunities. And I use that word a lot, is elite opportunities, because I think there's all kinds of opportunities in sport, but at the very top level, at the high school level, there's all kinds of great opportunities, and that's what we're trying to do. And a big part for me was I had great people growing up who volunteered their time to allow me to coach, but I never really had great coaches. And I always thought if I would have had great coaches and they would have opened up opportunities, my pathway might have been a little bit different. So that's been a big motivation for me too.
No, it's huge. You briefly touched on your wife coaching with you. How'd that kind of come about? When you guys meet, was she a coach right away? Like, how did that kind of happen? Because it's kind of cool seeing husband and coach coaching the 2 different teams.
Yeah, I got super lucky, and I actually met Sarah the year that we were opening Graham in 2006, and she was the athletic director of advertising and promotions at the University of Toronto at the time. And we met through some family, and then we went, she came out west, and she didn't coach the first few years because she was working in Vancouver. But Sarah played university basketball and had a big background in sport. She went to St. Mike's with Mr. Nash and played there. And so she had coached many times prior to. When we finally were able to settle, we first settled in Abbotsford and then to Chilliwack just to be closer to the gym. Once she had a job close and we were in a close destination, she started, I think it was year 3 or 4. So it's been great. And we've had 2 kids since. Grayson's 11 and Brown's 8. And we raise our kids in the gym, and I don't think there's a better place to raise your kids. And they've had a ton of role models that we've coached. And so having a family for us didn't pull us away from the sport. It almost brought us more into it because it's just a great place. My kids can make dinner in our PE office every night. They've got a whole selection of things they like to make. But we spend a lot of time in the gym. And because we do it together, it allows me to spend a lot of time in the gym. So we're super lucky that way.
Yeah, no, and you know what? I think your kids will look back at it very fondly when they get older. I mean, what a cool opportunity. You're going to have the opportunity to coach them coming up. So what sports do they play?
Yeah, they both play basketball. And right now, we let them play whatever they want. And they're playing baseball and lacrosse. And so they're just becoming athletes and enjoying it. But we're good friends with the Tuksheras, obviously. And Al always talks about having his 2 girls grow up in the gym. And that worked out pretty well for them. So we figure it's a pretty good recipe for success.
Yeah, no, it turned out great for them for sure. So you've got you start with 0 wins for basketball, and so give me the projection of how it goes until you get to this past season, where obviously you reached your ultimate goal of winning the provincial championship. You've had a lot of good teams. I've liked watching your teams play for several years now. It's not like it was a one-hit wonder. You guys have been good for a while, and you've had some very talented groups come through. So talk about the progression from zero. Very few people know what 0 feels like. Okay.
0 is not good. 0 is not good.
When I went and coached at STA, we lost by 80 points to York House. Okay, so I'm close. I know I got a general feeling what it feels like to lose by 80. There's not too many people that feel that feeling. So you started 0. Give me the progression of what that looked like.
I got super lucky in that grade 10 class. That first class, we had 2 young boys at that point, Micah Cockrell and Chris Thompson. And they were both pretty skilled. And then 2 years younger than that, we had a huge slew of kids, led by Lucas Manis, who would go on to Calgary and win a national championship. But with that group, that kind of was our launching pad. And when the grade 10s went to grade 11, we still didn't have grade 12s in the school, so we played 1 year of single A. And we still got pumped pretty bad by a lot of teams. But it was a good transition moving in that direction. And then the following year, Micah and Chris were in grade 12. We started, I'm a year off. Yeah, so they would have been in grade 9. So then this next year, when we add the grade 12s, we go to double A, and we're getting better, and we've got kids passionate about basketball, and I'm opening the gym, and we win some games. It's the next year, it would have been 2009, 2010. We actually make a run and make the provincials. And that was the year that I really got to start meeting coaches, and we start to be on the radar, and we go to Kamloops back in the day, which was a great provincials, and we win our first 2 games, ended up playing. It was a year that R.C. Palmer with Coach Eaves and was it Britannia? I can't remember. But anyway, we make it to the semifinal. We end up losing that game, but that was kind of our first run. And once we made provincials, it was the first time any team in Chilliwack had made basketball provincials in a long time, since the days of the girls at Chilliwack. And so a little bit of interest in the community, and then it just started to snowball. And that's when that group of grade 10 boys led by Lucas, in grade 11, we would make the provincials again, in grade 12 again. And we made 2 semifinals, and we started to learn. But I was a pretty young coach still, and I still bug Aaron Mitchell because we played them in a semifinal, and he outcoached me so badly that it was embarrassing. And I still tell him if we would have had good coaching, we would have beat him that game. But and that was the beginning of a really great long friendship that we still have today. But then from there, we just started to continually offer more opportunity, and that's really the goal. Offer then that's where the story of me starting to open the gym at 5:30 started. And if you open the doors, kids were getting up, and I still do that today. And then just creating more opportunity for kids to
What
get
time does school
better.
start over there?
8:15. And so a typical morning for us is I get up about 4:45, get to school, open the doors for 5:30, and by 6 o'clock, we'll have anywhere from 15 to 20 kids in there. By 7:30, there'll be 50 kids in there. And we keep it pretty unstructured in the morning. Some guys have really specific training schedules that they're following. Some guys are just coming in and having fun. But that was for me, it was just getting basketballs in kids' hands. And the more kids, the better. Not just boys, but girls. And we've been super lucky to have some amazing girls. Deanna Teixeira, Caitlin McDonald, Jenica Bannerman. Those types of girls were a huge role model for our girls. And they were in the gym every day. So it's just kind of been a culture, again, that we've always preached every day. Let's get 1% better. Let's create elite opportunities. And kids are excited. Kids are excited to compete, and I don't think we embrace that enough anymore. I think it's okay for our kids to win and lose and learn how to do both. And so that's kind of how we started the adventure. And now, as we're coming off a provincial championship, it doesn't stop there. We're just thinking about what we do next. But a big thing for us has been coaching development for sure. And
let's go specifically the last 5 years. So the last 5 years, your teams have consistently competed at the top level of the entire province, to be honest with you. It's not even a AA, AAA thing. It's like literally at the top level of the province. What was it like the first time you guys got to play some of the really good quad A teams and actually did okay?
Yeah.
Was there a specific moment you remember? Do you remember a specific game where you were like, hey, wait a second, that didn't go so bad?
Well, and before I even talk about that, when we were 3 tiers, the AA level was, I still say, one of the top 8 to 10 teams in the province were always some of the best teams. And we've had battles, and some of my best friends now, as I grow out of AA and we're moving to 4A, a lot of those coaches at the AA level will be some of my best friends forever. So we would battle with Steve Anderson in Southridge and Blake Gage at Brentwood, and we would travel to make sure we were playing the best. And we were always, like, as a AA powerhouse, we played in the snowball a few times, but we all know that at AA it's a little bit more difficult to get those invites to the big tournaments. And then we kept growing and we kept getting better, and I think we have such a great basketball community, and everybody respects each other, but everyone respects each other's hard work too. And we've really noticed in the last 3 years with our program that now we're getting invites to Kodiak Classic and Samara's Invitational. And really, we play all 4A up until Christmas and then settle into our 3A tournaments and games in the second semester. But going back to your question about when did we know, it was kind of a multi-stage, because all of a sudden we were competing and beating the top 2A teams, and that was excellent. And then when we went to the next tier, we were competing. But it's the last 3 years where, and it's the reason, one of the main reasons we won this year is because we sat down and looked at our schedule, and we wanted to play games where we were always within 3 or 5 points, and there was tough situations in the fourth quarter, and you were battling every game, because winning by 30 and 40 points wasn't preparing us. And that was a big issue, is we weren't playing enough of those big games when we got to the dance in March. And so in the last, I would say, to be honest, in the last 3 years, we felt like we can compete with anybody. Saying that, Lucas and Josiah Cockrell's group, who graduated about 7 years ago now, that group, we were taking on Kits and those types of teams there. And then we had a little rebuild, and then we continued on. But the last 2 years, it's been awesome. And it's awesome to get those invites. It's awesome to meet those coaches and become friends with them. And now I feel pretty lucky, because I have a pretty solid group of friendships from single A all the way to quad A, because this will be our last year AAA. And then we're going to quad A. So in the last 14 years, we'll have played in every tier. And I don't know if there's any other school that can say that. So, and we're excited about moving. We also are hopeful and excited about trying to defend a provincial championship at AAA one more year. But for sure, that scheduling and those competitive games, and the fact that we're one of the most competitive provinces in the country for basketball, you just get so many great games. And so this year, huge reason that we made the run we did, because we'd been in so many of those situations. Jude Hall was a monster. Every time we got down in a game, we'd call a timeout, we'd sit down, and before I could even talk, Jude would say, "We're good. Everybody take a breath, relax." And he said that twice at Provincials. He said that when we were down 12 with 3.5 minutes left to Brookswood in the Eastern Valley semifinal, which I was like, we're in big trouble. Took a timeout, and they calmed themselves down. And that was because we played so many games that were exactly the same. So it was a huge part of our run.
Yeah, for sure. Talk about your team this year a little bit. I mean, obviously, it turned out great at the end. What was it? How long have you seen these kids come through the program? Talk about their development and to get to the spot that they were. And I mean, you had a pretty loaded roster. The team was good all the way through. Give me a little rundown of that situation.
So we've had a pretty great advantage for a number of years, because when they built our school, they decided we were going to be a middle school and a secondary school. So we were 7 to 12. Chilliwack's reconfigured now, and Ministry of Education has just announced a huge expansion at our school. So this year we're now grade 9 to 12. This year we're going to be just over 1,300 kids. Back in the day, we were only 1,000 kids, grade 7 to 12. And this grad class that we have right now is either the last or second. I think it's the second last group that came to us in grade 7. So we've had most of these kids since they were in grade 7. So obviously we've seen them grow in just size, but also work hard. Like Cairo Elmerez is a great example. He's always been a tiny little dude, but he always made sure he put in the most work every day. And then obviously we got super lucky to have 6'10" and 6'11" twins, and the Clims played a huge part. Jude Hall is a multi-sport guy. He's an elite baseball player, will eventually end up down south playing baseball, and he wasn't even sure he was going to play this year. And he was a rock star the whole time. Clay Kurtz is in grade 11 this year. He had an okay junior season, and this year came out and did his thing. And then we had a whole bunch of additional players. Aiden Buchanan, who came and he had to sit all of last year because he had transferred, sacrificed that so he could be a part of it this year. But the season was going well. We were playing good games and then not so good. A typical high school season. I think it really changed direction when we got pounded by Dutchess Park in Aaron's tournament at STM. We lost by almost 40 points. And that film, I think I watched 1,000 times after. And that was kind of where we started to make changes and focus on individual things that needed to get better. One of them was the defense across the board, but specifically with the Clims, because they were watching the ball, they were late on movements, they were late on help. And so what was happening is they were getting into foul trouble early. And both Vernon and Dutchess Park, that was what they were expecting at Provincials, that they would get in foul trouble. They had a plan around that, and we would go. This year I brought in a young coach, played at Laurentian, and his name's Mark Romallo. And I tell every interview I do like this, Mark's one of the main reasons we won the championship this year, because he came in, I asked him if he could have a mindset on defense. He said absolutely. He played all 5 years at U Sport. He was the captain of Laurentian in his 5th year and only averaged 3.5 minutes a game. So that kind of tells you what kind of guy he was. And he came in and was working every day, especially with Zach and Matthias. And I always tell people that on our run, and I'd never had a run where we win in the end, but on the run, there were always little things happening. Just, it could be a small little thing. And I'd be like, I would recognize that didn't happen ever before, or that's never happened in a season, and they were one little thing, and then another little thing will happen. And I talked about Jude being calm on the bench. That was one. But little things continually happen. Then we cut the net down at the end of Provincials, and I look back to all those little things. All those little things are the reason that we won. Those were all little things that had never happened before. And a bunch of them were because, and if I just back up to the beginning of the season, like you mentioned, we'd been to semifinals, quarterfinals, 8, 9 times. We never got to the provincial final. I was working my butt off, but I couldn't figure out why weren't we getting to the next level? And I recommend this to every coach. And actually this fall, I'm going to do a presentation at Semiamu for coaches. But just the idea that I sat down, Al Tukshare is one of my mentors for sure. But we sat down for 3 hours and we went through the entire program. And he asked me hard questions. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? Why are you doing this? What are you doing here? And we evaluated every single thing I had put in. And then we went back and talked about the things we needed to change to win that game. And all of those things were changes that we made that allowed those little things to happen. So again, it's a huge kudos to coach.
Can we get specific on some of those? Let's get specific on some of those. Give me a couple examples of what those actually were.
For sure. Everything from player development to game time changes to competition preparation. A big one, another example would be timeouts. How are you running your timeout? And so normally a timeout is called, guys sit down. I would come in, I would do what I thought I needed to do. I would ask other coaches if they had anything, and we would go back out there. Coach is like, that's great. That's what most coaches do. What about if you structured it better? And so what we did this year was Romalo always got in the first 20 seconds. And that first 20 seconds, it was defense. He talked about that. We had a coaching staff of 4. So I would stand on the outside, talk to Brian and TJ about anything they saw. And then I would come in for the last 30 to 35 seconds, any offensive adjustment or ATO that we were going to run out of a timeout, I would put in. And that structure allowed, and then at that point when I was in there, Romalo came out. So Romalo would be on the court so that players would come out of my little talk. And if he had missed anything or needed any individual defensive schemes or ideas, he would tell them. That little structure in the timeout created so much more constructive time for us that it was just preparing them better to go out. That was one little example. But their individual development was a big one. What were we doing? How were we focusing on it? Scheduling became a big one. Off-court training became a big one. Positive touches. I will preach about positive touches. So every game we record positive interactions between teammates. So it could be a high five. It could be a pickup off the floor. It could be a let's go. But anytime a player has a positive contact or a positive communication, we record that, and then we track our positive touches. And as we know, when you're winning, the positive touches are high. When you're losing, the positive touches drop. So that became a huge part, is staying mentally positive in the game, because there's going to be flows. And that was a big one. That's why we came back from 12 down with 3.5 minutes left, and we were able to turn a 38-point loss to Dutchess Park into a win at the provincial championship. So those things, all of those things were a huge part. The other huge impact was we talked about my coaching and what I could do to improve. And we made a conscious effort for me to go and work with Basketball Canada in the last 18 months. So in the last 18 months, I went to Hamilton. I did all of my certification for Canada Basketball. I was observed this year. And so I was always working with a mentor coach. And I, as an athletic director, I'm mentored all kinds of young coaches, but sometimes you get in a position where you don't have someone else giving you enough positive or constructive feedback. And so that was a huge part. I was like, you've got to make sure that you're continuing to grow. So a huge part was the Basketball Canada development that I've done. And that's given me motivation to keep learning and move on. So those were things that got us there. And then when we got to provincials, we tried to put them all together. And if you see the first game was terrible. And it was bad because we couldn't really prepare. We didn't know anything about Ladysmith. We knew they kind of had a player. We won the game, but we didn't play well. If you see me coach, I can lose my voice really easily. I lost my voice in the first quarter. And that game finished, and I was like, we are not going to do well if this is how we're going to play. And I think this year I also became super addicted to film. And Al's assistant, Dan, who runs Excel, who's another great friend of mine, he's always preaching to me that idea of breaking down that film and showing kids mistakes and learning from those mistakes. And so that night after Ladysmith, I was up all night, and it was just not good. There was a time where the coaches weren't on the same page, and it was just chaos. And I think that was a great game for us because we prepared for the next three. The McGee game wasn't much better because we again hadn't seen them. We didn't have video, but we played more controlled. We were structured. We were all on the page. And then I took that film and reviewed where our mistakes were. But then we knew we were going in against Vernon. And we had a battle with Vernon in our championship final in our tournament. And actually, our boys and coaching staff were much more nervous about that game than the Dutchess Park game. If you talk to anybody else in the province, they would have said, if Graham gets by Vernon, they're going to get blown out by Dutchess Park. And even my good friends Joe T and Aaron were like, there's no chance we thought you were winning that game. But we played a good game against Vernon, and the difference became, and this is all, we joke about this, and the Klims will joke about it, but Matthias Klim got Provincial Defensive Player of the Year, or of the tournament, and he averaged 7.8 blocks a game. That only happened within a couple weeks of provincials, and that was all Romalo's work with him. He was no longer late. He was getting into position, so he was getting blocks. He was communicating, and that was one of those little things. Like, he won the defensive player of the tournament. We all looked at each other. He'd been a liability for us for most of the season on defense. And so he had grown so much through that game. And both Zach and Matthias were huge against Vernon. And I have become good friends with the Vernon coaching staff, and Jordan and I are great. And so we've talked a ton about those games. And both teams just expected for us to get into some foul trouble and then to play their game. We beat Vernon, and now I'm like, okay. And so I go home, and I think I was still watching film at 3:30, and I'm like, I better get some sleep. But at that point, and one thing that I've learned through Basketball Canada is good coaches always have a great game plan. Excellent coaches have 5 game plans. They've got plan A, B, C, D, and E. And so we knew that against Dutchess Park, we dropped off shooters and were trying to help too much in the paint, so they were being left wide open. But they're so talented and so athletic that they were getting paint, kicking it out, and wide open looks. And they hit a ton of shots in that St. Thomas More championship. But we knew we had to figure out how to stop that. And at 3:30, I kind of had 5 defensive plans, but I had no idea what was going to work. So anyway, I laid down, got up about 7:30, phoned Coach Romalo. I'm like, we got to meet and talk about what defense we're going to play. So we met in the AA final, and I said, well, these are the 5 options. And we debated, and then a little light bulb went on, and I'm like, do you think we could combine 2 of these? And he's like, and Romalo's dad had the exact same career as me. He was an athletic director and a basketball coach. He's like, oh, my dad has combined zone and man-to-man lots and run different hybrids. And so we started talking about what that would look like a matchup zone where we showed man, but it was zone, because we knew we were going to have to try and outcoach Jordan. And Jordan is just a phenomenal basketball brain. And so we started talking about this crazy idea, which we've never practiced. We've never talked about it. And now we're about 90 minutes before the game. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. Let's play this 3-2 mashing up zone. And I'm like, I guess we better teach the players. So we go into the change room, and we're like, okay, boys, we're going to set up in this 3-2 look, but it's really going to be man-to-man. And the main goal was you always had to have a man. So we weren't going to allow them to overload a side and leave defenders over here. We were going to make sure that they had a man all the time, but we were set up in the zone. And kids are all good. I do my pregame for the provincial final. They go out, coaches stay in the room, and I'm like, we're going to lose a provincial championship running a defense that we've never run before. And Romalo's like, no, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. So we get out there, and I can't say enough about Christina and the LEC and what a great job we do with our provincial championship. You get out there, and there's fans, and you're on center court, and there's a pregame. And I would say even 2 years ago, I would have thrown up multiple times before the game. I never felt that way. I felt like we were confident. I was confident in my coaching. The boys were confident. So we get out on the floor, game starts. Anyone in basketball knows that in the first half, you defend the hoop that you're at. And so we're running this new defense, but I've got Romalo and Coach Jansen and Coach Klim, and they're screaming at guys, and guys are picking up, and we're not breaking down at all. And I'm like, oh, this might work. And I'm looking at Jordan, and Jordan looks confused, and I'm thinking, this is great. We play a pretty solid first half. We go into the change room, do our pregame. Romalo makes a couple little tweaks, make sure we remember stuff. Out we go. I'm last to come out. I come out onto the floor, and our boys are going to the opposite end of the court to defend. And it's the first time I'm like, oh, we're in big trouble. Because now we can't help them on the side. So the 5 of them are going down there to run this defense that we've run for half the year or half the game on their own. And in the second half, if you watch the film, we break down a couple times and leave shooters open a couple times. But we stayed in it the whole game. The entire game we stayed in this hybrid matchup, zone man-to-man. And I've had long conversations with Jordan about it. And it just completely changed their flow. They couldn't run their zone. They couldn't run their man-to-man. They weren't getting open. And then they still went on runs. Like, I can't say how proud I was of the Dutchess Park guys. But it was one of those times. And if you've been in the experience of losing those games, I countless times I remember looking up the clock thinking, we're down this many points and there's only that much time left. This isn't going to happen. In this game, there was a point we were up 20. And all I could think of was, oh my goodness, we're going to lose the provincial championship after being up 20. That's all I could think about. And obviously they went on a couple runs. They got it back to 8 at one point, but then we just kept going. So we get in late into the fourth quarter, and I'm focused. And for those that don't know, my really good friend Vladdy Nikic was sitting behind me with his dad. And so I looked at him a few times in the game, and we had talked briefly at halftime. So there's a minute left, and they shoot a 3, clunks out. We get the rebound. They foul us, and we're going to the line, and we're up 9, and there's 52 seconds left. And I'm like, whoa, we might have a chance here. And I look back at Vladdy, and he's giving me the 2 thumbs up. So we hit the free throws. We're up 11. They go down, move the ball around, miss a shot. We get the rebound, foul, 30 seconds left. And all of a sudden, my whole body was like, I had goosebumps. I've got goosebumps right now telling the story. And I'm looking at Vlad, and he's like, and I'm like, we're going to win. I can't believe we're going to win. Anyway, we make a couple more free throws. It takes a little bit of time to tick off the clock. Clock runs down, and I've said it in other interviews, besides a couple babies being born and a marriage or a wedding, it was the best feeling of my life, and it's surreal now because 4 days later we shut the world down with COVID. The fact that we got it in and got to do it, it's anytime I have a bad feeling or I'm stressed about COVID or stressed, I can just go back and think, or all I got to do is pull up my phone with my banner and my family there, and that gets me through any day. So it was a special run. That was a long story, but it was I'll tell that story for the next 75 years.
Yeah, no kidding. No, for sure. And listen, I watched a bit of that game. You totally took them out of their offense. They had no idea. They had guys that, and I've seen them. Jordan does a phenomenal job with that group. And they were young. They were gunners. They were flying them all over the place. They were getting in the paint. Well, that day they couldn't do any of that stuff. They broke down and they were just doing step back threes. They lost their focus. They didn't know what they were going to do. They looked confused. They stopped running their stuff. It was like they didn't know what to do against it. And sometimes when you're surprised if it's going to work, well, the other team, if it works, the other team for sure is going to be surprised. So it definitely made an impact on that, and very cool to pull it off for sure.
Yeah, and I would stress that message to any coach. Try new ideas. Don't get stuck in one concept. Obviously, there's things that coaches do year after year, but continue to expand what you're doing at both ends of the floor, because for us this year, it was – and the other thing is when you get that group that you have, whether it's girls or boys, every year is going to be different. So don't expect that you're going to run this same offense every year. And this year we got lucky because we had some really large, tall post players. And so we completely redesigned our offense around them. And next year we'll have to redesign again because we're going to be guard heavy again and a little bit smaller. But the idea of having multiple game plans to be able to go to, the idea of continually changing and adapting and learning, those are super, super important things. The other thing that we did that really helped is when we played Dutchess Park the last time, we were playing more of a pack line defense. So we were helping off the strong side shooter to close those gaps. After that game, we kind of went away, and pack line works for a lot of teams, but we went away from that and we weren't helping off that strong side, and we were actually hedging harder and switching higher. And so anyway, we just kept making changes. But if you can film practices or games, it is by far one of the best learning tools for not only coaches but players too.
You film practice as well?
Some practices. We don't film every practice. No, that's another key part of having a good program is extra support staff. And I've always been super lucky to have students that want to be a part of it, not as players but as managers. And so the more people, I know there's a philosophy out there that you just want to do it by yourself because then you get to make all the decisions. I strongly encourage everyone, like, bring in good people. Like you watch on TV, there's no team with one coach on the bench. The more people, the more ideas, the more brains you have, and they have to have the same concept. But so we don't film every practice. We'll film big practices where we're leading up to it. And into the provincials, we would film practices. But it's a great tool, and it takes time for sure. But it's rewarding and it's super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk briefly about the teachers and admin at your school. You guys get a lot of people out to your games. You seem to have a tremendous amount of support. I know a lot of athletic directors and coaches and teachers don't have the support that you clearly have. Mm-hmm. What's that? That's got to be pretty cool to have that feeling of having great people around you all the time.
I think it's the same. It doesn't matter what profession or career or job you're doing. I think if you work really hard, I think you get respect wherever you are working. And so that's never been an issue for us at Graham because I created a strong leadership group in PE athletics, and we continually add. Sometimes we lose, but we've got a great group of people, and we do really great things for kids. So we've gone through, since 2006, we've gone through 5 principals. I've been lucky that they've all been excellent, but they've also always let me continue to do my thing. So because they know and they're confident that we're working hard and creating great opportunities. So I think relationships, though, in education obviously are huge. That's what we're doing, is we're working with other human beings, but just always trying to build positive relationships. And for high school sports, you have to have your academic teachers on board, and kids are going to miss school. And so you want to be providing as many helpful opportunities with academic teachers. And sometimes it's not easy because, as we know, kids do miss some school to travel. But that's always been one of my goals, is to be a leader in our school, be supportive, not just for, when I do talks with our new kids coming in, I always tell them to find a passion, and it might be athletics, and this is where it's going to be, but it might be music or drama or science, but come into our building and find a passion. And then encouraging those other teachers in the building to create opportunities for their passion. So I really try to make sure it's not us, athletics, but we're a family and a school. And I think that's why we get the support, is we also go to the drama productions and the music concerts. And when we do make runs in sport, you do get to see a big supportive, caring group. And so it's been pretty easy for me to build that culture, but it takes time. And it doesn't happen overnight, but it is reaching out to everyone, even the metalwork teacher or whoever, and getting everybody involved. So I think that's super important to make a real program. And I think we see that sometimes we see teams show up where they've had a group of boys or girls be together and they have some success. But to build that program at the high school level, it takes the whole school now. And I think that as long as I encourage other teachers, their passions, they do the same with us. And that's ultimately the goal of school, is to create opportunities for kids to find their passion in life and get them ready to move on to the next step. So
last piece, obviously you couldn't do it without an extraordinarily supportive wife. She's in the gym with you all the time. That's got to be really cool. She does a fantastic job. I've watched her as a coach for a long time, obviously, because I coach girls basketball. She's gotten better every year. Her teams are better every year. The program's growing nonstop. What's it like having an opportunity to share that with her as well?
Yeah, it's super special. And it's also, it is tough when there's young coaches who are keen, but then they fall in love and get married and start to have babies, and you only have 24 hours in the day. And so I for sure have lost a few coaches because of young families, but we're super lucky because we do it together. That, like I said earlier, is there's not a better place to raise your kids than in a gymnasium. And the fact we get to do it together, and we both love doing it. And Sarah's not a teacher, she's a financial advisor. And I think that's super important too, is that BC high school sports, part of the reason we have so much success is it's not just teachers, it's so many volunteer community members. And without those people in the community helping coach and volunteer, we wouldn't have the program that we did. But it's an easy go for us because you said, when I get up early, they're still in bed, but then after school, they'll all be there. And like you said, my son's going into grade 6. So this was my 20th year coaching. And I haven't yet coached my own kids. So I'm pretty excited to stick around. We'll see what happens in the future, but I'm not going anywhere until I get to coach my son for sure.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. I think it's been a great opportunity to share your story and kind of give people a glimpse into the program. I'm excited to see hopefully we get to see your team play this year, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to say thanks for doing this, and thanks for being one of those people out there that continually promotes the game. I think we have more great people promoting club and high school basketball, and I think that there's a place for both of them for sure. You're in both worlds. I'm in both worlds. I think great people keep providing great opportunities, and we're just going to see more and more success. So thanks again for doing this, and it was super fun, and fingers crossed that we get a season in the winter.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you so much. Take care.